Hello! So, before we start with this video, we want to apologize because we meant to upload something last Friday.
Yeah, but the washing machine kind of ruined everything.
Yeah.
Including our lives and our schedules. So, yay for clean clothes, but not so much for really good quality video.
So we decided we would go ahead and refilm everything for you.
And in 2 parts, because there's just like...
No way all those books are gonna fit in one video.
So welcome to part 1 of what we read for the month of...
Are we gonna make it like a
March
5 when we put the numbers?
Because we're cheeky, possibly yes.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we had originally filmed this massively long what we read video, but like Maki said, we had issues with the sound because of our laundry, and since we had enough books, or well, I have more than enough books anyway, we decided it would be better to do it in 2 parts. But before we get to the books, let me talk a little bit about 2 things. I cut my hair. That's first one. Actually,
I
Maki
cut her hair.
cut my hair. I just felt like having it short and he cut it for me and I think it looks great. Second thing is new glasses. So now I have cool glasses like Maki does. Mine are just pink while his are blue. And I got these thanks to Firmoo, who offered to send me a pair for review. I have to say, they're just the kinds of frames I like, which is like plastic.
Yeah.
And they sort of have the same feel as like all those cool
yeah, they rest on your
you
face.
See on, in like Urban Outfitters and stuff like that. The lenses are great. They're prescription lenses, so they actually were able to do that for me. They're the most basic lenses, however, so they don't have any of like the bells and whistles you can add for extra cash. So yeah, I got these. They were pretty quick. I think it took under a month. Maybe it was like 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks maybe for me to get them. I'm really enjoying using them. But aside from the fact that these glasses are cute, and it was really, really easy to upload the prescription and get, you know, all of that done. Like I didn't have to do anything except upload my official prescription from my doctor. And yeah, if I wanted to add like extra things, like maybe make the lens the kind that's good for if you're using the computer a lot, or maybe add something like for UV protection. You can also do that, but that's extra fees. You can check all of that out on the website. But I also ended up getting this very cute glasses case. It actually came in the gray pouch first, but this glasses case is the case for my glasses, obviously. And it has the typical lens, you know, cleaning cloth that comes with most glasses. But also, and I thought this was pretty cool, they actually also send you like the extra screws and stuff that you need to tighten the glasses if you want to, or to readjust the arms of the glasses. So that was pretty cool. If you want to find out more about Firmoo, they'll be linked down below, and you should definitely check out their site. Okay, moving on from my glasses review. We are gonna talk about books. We decided it would be best if we sort of categorize again, like we did last time, our videos. So first category for me is gonna be rereads. So, first thing we're going to kick off with Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This is the story of 2 sisters, Eleanor and Marianne, and sort of just the day-to-day of their lives, but particularly focusing on their familial atmosphere and also their romantic lives. And the 2 sisters are very different, and the reason I loved rereading this story was because I've always enjoyed Jane Austen's writing, but also the family in this one, especially those 2 sisters, reminds me of my own family. It was just great to be back in this world and back with this writing, and even though I knew how everything was going to play out, I still felt as keenly for both girls as I did the first time I read it, so that was really good. The next thing that I reread was an entire series, and I actually managed to reread all of it while I was on my trip in Iceland, which was unexpected. So, first we have Alana, the First Adventure. Second is In the Hand of the Goddess. Third is The Woman Who Rides Like a Man. And the fourth is Lioness Rampant. And these are the 4 books in the Song of the Lioness Quartet by Tamara Pierce. Yes, I know we are behind on our Tamara Pierce event. Sorry, this is why we haven't been doing any dates, but this video should go up soon because I just finished rereading, obviously. This entire series is about a girl named Alana who doesn't want to be like a court lady, basically, and at the very beginning she switches places with her brother Tom, so she gets to go and train to be a knight. Of course, she's disguised as a boy and all the shenanigans ensue. It basically follows her journey from what do you call it?
Being
from
a page
to squire to knight to the champion.
Hero, champion of the... I was about to say Masters of the Universe, but no, that's a totally different thing.
I have to say, it's really fun to binge read the series because the stories just work so well together. I think it feels more like they're meant to be one entire collective story as opposed to like all these separate stories, even though they're sectioned up very, very well. Yeah, so regardless, it was just fun to revisit the story, to be with Alana again, and to see her like persevere through every single thing she had to go through to become the amazing, amazing, amazing King's Champion she is by the very last book. And as someone who is now admitting to being an otaku, I guess. It was just funny for me because I noticed a lot more like the other relationship she had.
So basically saw it in anime.
It was great! I just loved it. All the secondary characters, all the cast of characters. Once again, great thing to revisit.
Bishonen.
Would highly recommend checking out this entire series, and I cannot wait to reread The Immortals because that one I have not reread in forever, so... Numer Salmonen. That's happening next. And the last thing I reread is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This is the story of a girl named Alina who discovers quite belatedly that she actually has these incredible magical abilities that make her one of the Grisha, or the magic users in this world. Her ability is particularly special because it involves light and the summoning of it, and she is going to be considered, or well, she is considered the possible savior, as there is this like creepy piece of like land that is called the Fold that is basically darkness and inhabited by dark creatures, and her light is the only thing that could cure it. So it just follows Alina as she navigates like the complications of finding out she's a magic user, learning how to wield that magic, and also living life at the court now that she's discovered to be a Grisha. And I enjoyed this as much as the first time I read it. I still think the world is so good. It's Russian-inspired fantasy, which is really fun. I also enjoyed the fact that I got to know Alina again because I forgot how sassy she is. Like that never that's never on the forefront of my mind when I think of Alina, but now that I've reread it, I was like, oh right. Also, it was just great to see all these secondary characters that I had enjoyed the first time around and to just like revisit them. And I'm actually quite eager to get to the second book because that's my favorite in the series, and also my actual favorite character of the series shows up in that one, so can't wait to reread this. Oh, Rachel reread it with me. I actually brought it to Iceland, this physical copy, because that was the one book I was like, I'm gonna bring with me, so that was fun.
Lovely.
Alright, section 1 over.
Which segues us into our review books. And so part 1 of my review pile to kind of kick things off, I got a couple of books from Smith Publicity, Aldo and Futura. Starting with Aldo, it's by Betty Jean Craig, and it is a mystery thriller love story in exactly that order. It starts with the kidnapping of this prestigious university's president under threat by, I want to say, international kind of human rights terrorists. Okay. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but they basically, because the university was doing like human genome kind of mapping and all of that stuff, so they were trying to prevent even more racism, this time based on your genetics, not just on your like well, no, literally by how doctored your genetics are.
Okay. That seems fair.
You know, average grade A human, free range human person, or somebody who's had like their intelligence and their, you know, proclivity to cancer like removed. Right? Lots of room for prejudice. It starts off, but the coolest thing is that it starts off as a memoir. It doesn't let the whole who is the bioterrorist person mystery hang all the way to the end. It reveals it right in the middle, and then it gives you a really great way to segue into the love story part of it. And it really is about love. It's strange. There's nothing like it like this out there, or maybe if there are, I haven't read enough of them because this isn't my cup of tea. But I am glad for the horizon broadening aspect of it, which is followed up by Futura, also sort of like a science fiction-y love story set in I want to say 2050 Paris, and it centers around a young girl named Ruby who's, you know, growing up in her life. And what I love about this book, it's a novella by Jordan Phillips, is that it sort of is divided into 4 parts because freedom, truth, love, and beauty are the 4 basically acts of this story. What I loved is that it's a story of how a young woman recovers from heartbreak, and I like how it could have happened in 2050, it could have happened back here. By the way, the science fiction aspect of this is in the year 2050. They have eliminated absolutely every single, you know, basic human need because it's all subsidized. Everybody gets a roof over their heads and, you know, 3 square meals. So what happens to a person in love at that time? Well, we find out in this book, and the spoilers, they're human. That hasn't changed. And so it's that, and it's so if you want like a futuristic type of love story and to see the human journey framed from that perspective, then this is definitely your book.
Oh, okay, so my review book section is a teensy bit longer. I'm going to start with the one ebook that I need to mention. It's a book called Our Dark Stars, and it's by Audrey Gray and Crystal Wade, I hope I remembered that correctly. It's about 2 different characters. There is Will, who is currently working with a Guardians of the Galaxy type crew. Okay. Sort of like that, but crossed with Firefly, I guess, because they are just trying to get enough money for him to reinstate himself as the captain of this other ship.
Basically space mercenaries?
Kinda.
Okay.
And then we have Talia, who is the only remaining survivor of a dynasty that died quite some time back. And these two meet by chance, and they have to decide whether they're going to work together towards a common goal or whether, you know, they're just going to keep using one another to get to their own individual goals. This sci-fi YA was fun for me because it's the kind of sci-fi YA I like to read. It reminded me of a bunch of other titles that I've read and enjoyed, like Starflight, Heart of Iron, The Diabolic. I'm trying to think of what else I can like throw your way, but basically, oh, These Broken Stars. All of these things very similar to that. I still thought it was fun. The writing was pretty solid, and the lore itself, even though it reminded me of a lot of the other stories, it also stood out enough on its own. And it ends on a pretty good note too, so you don't have to really think about waiting for a sequel. So that was pretty fun. Aside from that, I also read... Okay, I'm going to start with In Search of Us by Ava Delara. This is her sophomore novel. It comes in two perspectives. It's been told from two perspectives, I'm sorry. We have Marilyn, who is in Hollywood with her mother because her mom wants her to become a star, but that Marilyn isn't sure that that's what she wants for herself. And so during this one summer, she meets this boy, and she's also starting to like explore what options she has for herself and what she really wants to do. And then we have Angie, who is her daughter, and it's like decades later, and or a decade later, I'm just saying. She is curious about her birth father, who she has never met or heard of, and so she goes off to LA in search of answers. And it's a really compelling story because the way it is told, the switching between point of views was done really well. I also think that in terms of the subject matter, it was also done really well, and I really enjoyed seeing both perspectives. It is a heavier read because there's a lot going on for both of these girls, and it could get really heavy on the emotions and make me as a reader feel very heavy too, but it was definitely worth a read. I'm glad I picked up Ava's sophomore novel. And then, after In Search of Us, I read A Kiss in the Dark by Gina Tioka, I want to say. This is a book about a girl named Macy Atwood who is basically trying to figure out who the mysterious guy is who kissed her when there was a blackout at a Georgia high school football game. Of course, it's about more than that as well because it explores what happened to Macy and what happens between Macy and her friends and her potential romantic interest during her junior year and what's going on now in her senior year. And the author uses flashbacks to do that, which I thought worked really well for the story because it just gave you just enough to make you curious, and then she'd cut it off and then you'd have to keep on reading to find out what happened next. I think I would have liked this a lot more as a younger reader because it's just what I would have read during that time. It's a high school drama, basically. It's like watching like a teen drama on TV and seeing it unfold. And that was good for the most part. The writing is pretty solid. The characters are, well, like they're decently done, I want to say. Like they weren't personally memorable for me, but I think while I was reading it, I was still pretty like interested in seeing what would happen in the story. So does she figure out who the guy is? You'll have to read it to find out. And then, we have Daughter of the Siren Queen by Trisha Levenseller. This is the sequel to last year's Daughter of the Pirate King. And I can't tell you what this one is about, but I will tell you that last year, Daughter of the Pirate King came out, and it's about a girl named Alosa who deliberately gets herself kidnapped so she'll be on an enemy ship that she can search for a missing map piece. If that sounds complicated, it really isn't that complicated.
No, put yourself in harm's way to find something. That makes sense.
Last year was filled with like ship shenanigans, and this is also filled with ship shenanigans, but with Alosa and her own crew this time, which was really entertaining. And it concludes the series very well. I also have to say that I really love the ship in these books because I am a sucker for a good ship. Not just an actual ship, but also my...
Does the ship happen on the ship?
It does, actually.
There you go.
So it's like what do you call that?
It's a shipping ships.
I don't know. I just like ships. So yeah, it was funny. It was well paced. It was very entertaining. If you haven't tried reading this duology, and if you like pirates or the sea,
and who doesn't like
or like
pirates?
hijinks, definitely give this one a shot. Okay, and then we have a book that actually comes out today. Arushan, The End of Time by Roshni Chokshi. This is a very special book because it's actually the first book coming out under Rick Riordan's imprint. And I really, really love the idea behind that imprint because it basically is essentially Rick Riordan giving all of these people who are familiar with other mythology, like in this case Hindu, a chance to write stories that are sort of in the vein of his own series and worlds, but obviously they have more knowledge of these mythologies. And this one is Hindu mythology, like I said. It's about a girl named Aru who accidentally lights a lamp and starts off a set of events that could be potentially catastrophic for the entire universe. Sounds familiar?
Pandora's box, but with a different twist.
So it's basically exactly what it sounds like it's going to be based on what I told you about the imprint. It is a Rick Riordan type of adventure where this girl has to figure out how to fix the mistake she made, and along the way she learns that she has a godly heritage.
Yes.
And she encounters all these mythological creatures and beings from Hindu mythology, makes her own friends, and has a squad, which is a thing in Rick Riordan's books. And it's also just really funny. So I really enjoyed this. It's a little bit older than Percy Jackson because Aru comes across as a little bit older, I want to say.
That's fair.
Well, but in terms of like the humor and the adventure and like how it all plays out, it definitely reminded me of Rick Riordan's books, but in a good way. And I think it still stands out as being something very different because you can tell like the author has her own voice and it really comes out in the story. I was so excited to see how the mythology played into this, especially because I'm not as familiar with Hindu mythology and there's so many different aspects to it, which even Roshni Chokshi says in her like note at the end, but she does so well at just putting it all together in a way that like now I know what you're talking about if you ask me about all these things, which I thought was really cool. I can't tell you what like the main thing is, but I really wish I could because it's so cool. I think the concept is so great. Dying for book 2 basically. So yeah, so if you are interested in middle grade, or if you want to read something that's very Rick Riordan-esque, or if you just like stories that have like mythology and modern day mixed together, then definitely give Arusha and the End of Time a shot.
To tack on to the middle grade stuff, I was finally able to read my copy of Rise of the Jumbies. We got this in the mail. I read the Jumbies and reviewed it maybe a couple of videos back. And what's amazing is that it still carries on the traditional kind of take on how Jumbies are basically the Caribbean versions of the boogeymen and the monsters under the bed and in the closet and all that stuff. Only this time, our main character, Corinne, and her connection to the Jumbies is explored a little further in the book. If you notice, it's underwater, and because they've got like mermaids in the back.
I can connect.
So I know it's actually pretty great. It's a little slower than the first book, but I love how still on the topic of family. Oh, I love that. Still on the topic of what do you do when you're connected to something terrible. Like the Jumbies, right? And then more importantly, when even after everything that Corinne has tried, people still shun her because of her connection to the Jumbies. It's there. And the best part about this, and again, I'm far removed from both Caribbean culture and even the transatlantic slave trade, but it is referenced here as part of the story because the Jumbies are old, they're ancient, they're mythological as well. But for Tracy Baptiste to be able to weave in a tale that spans all the way back to the actual era of the slave trade, and to be very sensitive about it and to evoke the kind of emotion that just tells you, you know, without being too much on the nose, this is what happened. It's very matter of fact. But if you read it as an adult, you're like, oh my God, the terrible plight of slavery. And it's in there. It's in there. Just like in the first book they did that, in the second book they did that again, but deeper. And so I appreciate it so much, and I absolutely recommend it to, like, I see this as something that you can make your kids read in school. Because not only will it take you through a really cool story with really awesome fantastical characters, but there's that piece of the real world that is reflected and the issues that are, you know, if you dig a little deeper, it's thought-provoking, and like it's crazy. So happy that I got the copy.
Speaking of, I'm about to slide right in because speaking of underwater creatures, I forgot I had one more book that I read for review, and it's actually another one of my 5-star reads, and it happens to be my favorite book of 2018 so far. That book is To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. This is Alexandra's debut novel, which is really impressive considering how great it is. It is told from the perspective of 2 characters. We have Lyra, who is a siren princess who just so happens to collect the hearts of, you know, human princes every single birthday, so she has 17.
So savage.
When she breaks a siren law, however, she ends up getting punished by her mother, who is the Sea Queen, and she's turned human and given the ultimatum of having to give her mother the Golden Prince's Heart by the winter solstice or remain a human forever. And then we have Ellion, who is the Golden Prince in question, but he's not so much of a prince as he is a seafaring pirate type of prince, because he has deemed it his mission to rid the world of sirens who obviously have been murdering princes and other people. And he is much more comfortable on the ship than he is, you know, dressed as a prince and in his castle. So they meet unexpectedly, which, you know, typical. But of course, the more they get to know each other, the more they realize they might just have the wrong impression about certain things, and, you know, it just plays out as you might imagine it does. And well, actually that's a lie. I didn't even expect how it was going to play out, so whatever you think you might think, whatever way you think this one might play out, it's probably not going to be that way. Anyway, this one has excellent characters because I love both Lyra and Ellion a whole lot, but I also love the secondary characters a lot. There is wonderful magic in this one. The whole, like, being on a ship and being under the sea parts were really great. The actual story itself was very compelling. The banter was spot on, and the ship in this book is the best. I love it so, so much. Not just the actual ship, but also, like, the, you know, romantic ship. It's so good. She just took all these elements of what you know about the mermaids and sirens and even princes, really, and she just threw it all together into this story that is so good, so unique, probably the best, like, spin on the Little Mermaid and all that kind of lore that I have ever read in YA. So if you have yet to read this one, if it's on your TBR languishing there, please bump it up because it is so, so good, and I would highly recommend it. The last and final section of this video is what I'm gonna affectionately call the read or die section, which is basically just books that were already on my TBR that I finally read for the first time. So I'll start with the ebooks. First, we have Blurred Lines, which is by Lauren Lane. It's a new adult romance that centers around two best friends, Parker and Ben, and they've just been friends this entire time, and insist that there's never going to be anything romantic between them until such time as Parker decides that Ben is the only person who can help her get out of her sex rut, really, after being, you know, together with this dude for some time, and then the dude dumps her, so there's that, and that makes things complicated. I love this one. I read it on the plane to Iceland, and I know it was late, and I shouldn't have been so, like, you know, giggly and a little bit, like, freaking out the entire time, but it was great. It was so entertaining. It plays out exactly like a romantic comedy. What I think is the best thing about it is that Lauren Lane does a really good job emphasizing their friendship in a show and not tell way. Like, you know these two are friends, and you believe it, and you also know that there's the potential for something more, but I'll let you guys read it so you find out how it plays out. Then we have Scorched by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is the companion sequel to Frigid, which I read a couple of years ago. Scorched is about Andrea and Tanner, who sort of have a love-hate relationship with each other. They're kind of friends because their best friends are friends, but really they're also antagonistic with one another because they're just stubborn and passionate people. Tanner really likes Andrea, though, and he's kind of considering taking the next step and, like, dating her, but Andrea actually is dealing with a lot of personal stuff that makes it hard for her to really consider that sort of future with him. And this one was really good. I wasn't expecting how heavy certain parts of it would feel, but I think that it was handled in a very neat and very well done way. I also think that the other flip side of it was that there was a lot of cute banter and a lot of swoony bits, and that was really fun too. I think it ended a little bit more abruptly than I would have liked, but I still thought it was cute overall, and once again, I was just happy to be, like, revisiting Jennifer Armentrout's writing, which I haven't done in a while. And then the last ebook I need to mention is All of You by Christina Lee. This is about next door neighbors Bennett and Avery. Avery is the kind of girl who, because of her own familial experiences with love and her mom's, you know, example of romantic love, Avery's decided that she's an independent woman who, you know, she's the one who makes all of these, like, decisions for herself, and she can handle herself, and she's not really looking for a relationship per se. Meanwhile, Bennett, on the other hand, also is shaped by his own experiences in the past, and he's the complete opposite. He's holding out for the person he's gonna have a relationship, and so he's a virgin. And that's where that's the most interesting thing about the premise and what really drew me into it. But the book itself is also really great. There's a lot of banter, which is my favorite thing. If you can't tell, I've mentioned it like multiple times in this video. So
this is the most you've said the word banter
because
in like a while.
banter is so great, and it's what makes shipping so great. But it was just cool to like read a story where it was sort of reversed, because most of the time the ones I read are it's the girl who's the virgin and who's like hesitant to be in a relationship, and in this case it was the guy, and it was just really fun to see like the tension grow between them and to like see them try to fight it so hard. Avery because she knew she wasn't going to get the thing she wanted from Bennett, and Bennett because he wanted Avery but he also has his like own personal standards, I guess is what I want to say. But yeah, it's very cute. I didn't love it quite as much as the other two, but I still thought it was really enjoyable. And then I read Roomies by Christina Lauren. This book is about Holland and Calvin. Calvin is a singer who busks on the subway every so often, and that's how Holland knows him. But when her uncle needs a musician, like a talented one, to take the place of someone leaving his Broadway production, she suggests Calvin. Only catch is he has no legal papers. So in order for him to stay and to be able to work, she ends up marrying him and they become roomies. It's a fun premise, definitely something straight out of a romantic comedy, kind of like The Proposal actually, except, you know, with a Broadway spin. I like the New York parts, I like the Broadway bits. I thought the two characters were so much fun to read, and this one really had me laughing, not just because of the banter between the main couple, but like with everything else as well. I think like the one thing that I would say is like slightly niggling at me is like the whole like the legal papers thing, because I know a little bit about how that works. We both do. It's not that easy. It's not as easy or as quick as it kind of gets portrayed in the book. I'm sure it was different for them because they were both in this country, but like even so. So that was like the one thing that niggled at me, but otherwise totally enjoyed it, totally had fun reading it. And the very last book we're going to talk about in this video is not a book at all. We're going to talk about Fruits Basket again. I don't know how many times I've talked about this series, but I will never get tired of it. Okay. Anyway, I read volumes 5 through 12 of Fruits Basket, which means I completed the entire manga arc, and it was so good. I thought I had signed up for like this fluffy little thing where like you hug someone of the opposite gender and they turn into an animal. Nope. Apparently not, because the more I read, the heavier it got, and I was just like, I did not sign up for this. I did not sign up to have my feelings like literally run over by a train. But yes, I digress. I'm not going to tell you too much about that because that would be spoiling everything. But suffice to say, it was unlike what I thought it was going to be, and in a good way. I think it's such a great manga series. It's actually a really good one to start with if you're new to manga, because it's so easy to get into and so easy to like keep everything kind of like separate in your head. Best binge though, because if you go too long between them, you're going to kind of like forget certain names. Only because there's so many characters and there's so many convoluted plots. So it's it's grade A soap opera stuff, right? Yeah. But with that weird anime manga twist of so good, though. The family has a curse, and if you hug somebody and they're the opposite gender of you, they turn into their zodiac. Of course, it only applies to the 13 members of the zodiac. 12 members. What am I don't even know how to count. I can't count either. The 12 members of the zodiac. But yeah, it's such a great series. I'm so glad I own it. I'm so glad I binge read it. Would highly recommend it. And that concludes part 1 of what we read for the month of, I want to say March. That's like March, thereabouts. And so we will catch you guys again for part 2. We'll release that at the end of the week because we're totally playing catch up. And you will see us in part 2 dressed the exact same way. Woo! Because we're filming it right after this. Okay, everyone.